Hey everybody, welcome back to another Alaska cruise vlog. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are on the Carnival Luminosa, ported in Skagway, Alaska on our 7-night voyage through Southeast Alaska and the Inside Passage. This was probably my most anticipated port on this voyage. There's a lot to do in port. There's a lot of gold rush history. There's a lot of national park sites in town, which I always love to visit the national park sites. So we chose for our excursion the White Pass Railroad all the way up to just past the border into British Columbia, Canada, where we received a few mountain bikes that we rode all the way back into town in Skagway. So let's see how the excursion went. First, we got loaded up into a few vans and driven over to the train. Now, on the train, it was not very busy on our day. We had plenty of seats in our car, but I had heard and read that you really want to be on the left side of the train going up the pass, and so that's what we did. Though anyone who really wanted a seat on the left side had that opportunity, but this is going to give you the very best views going up the canyon up into British Columbia. Pretty much every site is going to be on the left side of the train. So this is a very historic train. This was actually used back in the day for transportation as well as shipping. A lot of the gold that was mined up in the Yukon was brought down and then loaded onto ships to be taken to wherever it was going throughout the rest of the world. But this was originally a steam train. You can actually elect to take the steam train version of this tour, and we actually got to see the steam train gearing up for the day. So it's cool to see that. We just had a nice diesel engine. Didn't really detract from the experience, and the cars themselves really feel kind of historic. Some restored, some older, some a little bit newer, so it just really kind of depends. You can also do like a luxury train excursion that has an open bar. That's very expensive. Overall, these tours can be on the pricier side. I really liked the overall value of this one, under $200 for each of us to do the whole tour for the day. So the first part of this journey, really just going through the gentle canyon climb here. There's the river right next to the train that you pass a few times. Just really pretty forest. You're going to be climbing 4,000 feet in elevation on this train trip over an hour and a half. So pretty steep climb into Canada, but absolutely beautiful. Really great views of the train as you make some pretty wide turns across some pretty crazy trestles. Over the years, some of those trestles, they've been replaced and they have the remains of the old ones. It just really feels like the Wild West out here. I can tell you from all the history I learned during my tours in Skagway during this day, I do not have what it takes to be a gold miner. It was rough out here. It was a lot of effort. Lots of people died building this railroad. Lots of people died on the walking path that they used to take to get to the Yukon in search for fortune. And it was a very, very, very thin amount of people that actually made it in the gold rush era, like actually made a fortune. So lots of cool history to learn, and they do a really great job of interpreting all that. Now this is about a 5-hour tour, including the biking down from Canada. No lunch or anything was served, so it's a pretty early tour, and then you're back in town by about 1 p.m. So I thought that was pretty good because we had a decent amount of time in port, so we could explore the rest of the town in the afternoon, grab some lunch, go explore some of the national park sites. It was an absolutely beautiful day, as you can see. I was a little worried about fog and like bad weather going on this train trip because it was expensive, but we had absolutely excellent weather. So amazing views, amazing footage for you to see here. Gives you a good idea of what you can see on the train on a really, really good day. Now the highway is on the other end of the canyon across the way, so that's what we rode our bikes down. Interestingly, when you take the bikes in Canada, you clear customs on the train into Canada, and then on the way back down the mountain, you actually clear customs back into the US on your bikes, which I thought was a pretty unique experience. So the train itself, there's no alcoholic beverages on this version of the train trip. They do have some tours, like I mentioned, that actually offer that. But they do have bottled waters at your seat when you arrive. And overall, I think that the tour itself of the train was probably the highlight for me. I'll give you some thoughts on the biking in just a minute. But the sights of the train and all the history that you learn is just really, really worth it. So about 30 minutes into the train trip, you really do start to climb up to the pass, White Pass. So White Pass is going to be the border of the United States and Canada as well. That's the highest point of the train trip. And then you level off for the last 20 minutes or so in British Columbia, and there's some really pretty mountain lakes. I'll say this is probably the least interesting part of the journey, only because the ride up the canyon is just so spectacular. It's still a very, very worthwhile trip. You can do it round trip as well. You don't have to get on bikes. You don't have to get on a bus. There are also train trips that will take you by train on this route and then load you onto some buses and take you into the actual Yukon, which is pretty cool. So people were electing to do that on the train. There's a lot of cars, as you can see. And so basically they separated us by different cars based on the excursion that we were doing. Some people were riding it up about 30-45 minutes or so to a hiking trail, so that was a option as well for folks. Really, really fun that there's just so many options to do here in Skagway. So maybe if it's your second or third time here in port on your multiple Alaska cruises, you can elect to do a different tour for next time. At certain points too, they had some merchandise going through the cabin, some hats and things like that, and I thought that they were very well priced, only $10 for a souvenir hat. So really a good deal there. What I really liked too was this trestle that was decommissioned. So no like train or anything went off the tracks here, but they built a new bridge. It just looks like something out of a Wild West movie. I really loved this shot. So lots and lots of fun things to do here on the train. And so we are at the top of our climb at the White Pass. This is where we are going to enter Canada. So it is noted with flags on either side of the border. You don't clear customs until you stop in Fraser, British Columbia, which is really not a town. It's really just a border stop, but that's where the train stops and turns around. You can see that the vegetation has changed a lot here as well. Lots of wind and snow coming through here in the wintertime, so not a ton of trees that are very high at all here in Fraser, but this was basically the view for the last 20 minutes or so of our ride. Nothing, absolutely breathtaking like the first part of the ride, I don't think, but still really pretty. So for this tour, since you do go into Canada, you are going to be required to take your passport with you on the tour. So just note that. So that's really important to know. And they check several times during the tour before you get on board the train. And then the Mounties come on and you just basically hold up your passport to your face. And they make sure everything looks good. They didn't look at anyone's passports more closely than that. So it was a very casual border stop for sure. And here we got off the train, boarded the vans again that drove up with the bikes. And so we have some cool mountain bikes that we drove maybe 10, 15 minutes or so down the road, pulled over to a pullout and then practiced a little bit on our mountain bikes. And here's where things, I think, was a little bit lame of the tour. You had to follow the guide the entire time. It was very slow going. I had my brakes on the entire time. I would have liked to have been able to go a little bit faster. There were a few interesting sights to see along the way that we stopped for, some beautiful waterfalls, some pullouts with some informational signs. A lot of the stuff you actually saw from the train. So overall, it was nice to get out on this beautiful day on the bikes, but was not necessarily my favorite part of the tour. Kind of wish that we could have just rode into town, maybe had the bikes for an hour or so and rode around town and then returned them at the end of the day. I understand that there's a lot of people on these ships that maybe are a little less experienced on a bike, and it is an active highway that we were riding on, but I kind of feel like if I could have just signed a waiver, signed my rights away like that, and then saw them a little bit later down in Skagway, that would have been a little bit more fun for me. But it was cool to see the train coming back down to Skagway across the canyon. So it's the same exact tract. So I do recommend, maybe mixing it up on the way down. By the time that we made it down, it was about an hour and a half, 2 hours later. And so we went to the Skagway Brewing Company where we had a free appetizer from a coupon that we got on the ship. And then we explored the rest of Skagway. So there are a number of different saloons that are preserved by the National Park Service. There's a National Park Visitor Center where you can get your passport stamp if you are someone who collects the National Passport stamps like me. Some other famous things to do in town. There's actually a brothel that is a museum. It's no longer active, but they have a restaurant in there on the bottom floor, and then folks that are dressed in period costumes for that establishment giving you tours. It's a lot of fun. There's a number of different things that you can do in town. So there's the Red Onion Saloon is the brothel, the red light district, back from the gold miner days, the gold rush days. Lots of train stuff here too, because this was an active railroad, so they had a snowplow engine, which was really cool. Lots of history on Soapy Smith, who was the mayor of the town and was a shyster. But after a few hours of exploring around town, it was time to head back to the ship. And we had a number of different ships in port. The Grand Princess being the ship that followed us from Juneau the day before. We decided, we wanted to go explore a little bit of the ship while in port, since we did a lot of exploring. We also had dinner at the Fahrenheit 555, which is the ship's only specialty restaurant, true specialty restaurant. It was fun to try the menu. It's very similar to the other specialty restaurants on other Carnival ships. The amuse-bouche was a little different on this one. I felt like the service was absolutely amazing. We had a great server, great crew in general on the Carnival Luminosa, I felt. Food was really delicious, so I grabbed some of the ahi tuna. My dad got a little bit of the salad, looks really good. And then I, of course, got the steak. I got the nice ribeye here. And a little side of onion rings and broccoli. Plenty of food here. I think it's really good value too, $49, including these really amazing chocolate desserts. On a week-long cruise, I definitely like to do the specialty restaurants at least once, just mixing things up a little bit. So overall, I can't recommend Fahrenheit 555 enough. Really good wine list as well if you're into wine. A little bit elevated compared to other spots on the ship. And because we had drinks on them everywhere because of the casino offer, we had a lot of free drinks in there. A local Skagway artist actually did a 30-minute Alaskan history little medley, which was awesome. And he actually got off the ship. He was like the last guy off the ship, and then we were departing. So I really love how they do that, and they clearly just bring him on board multiple times this summer, and he can do his act and go back home for dinner, which is really cool. So we were done for the day there in Skagway, and then we had the Love and Marriage game show a little bit later that evening, but we were off to Tracy Arm Fjord the next day, which was a scenic cruising day where we had actually purchased a excursion to get off of the ship. So we'll see you on the next vid.